On this episode of the show, I have with me Chris Church. He is the VP of Engineering at Rainforest, and we're going to be talking about having a zero-bug policy, what that means, how does it impact the release cycle, having small releases, and how small are those releases going to be, and really also the engineering org, the impact of the engineering org. How do you actually re-envision the engineering org potentially, that mindset shift to deliver this type of zero-bug policy, and maybe a couple other things. But Chris, thanks for taking the time.
Oh, happy to be here.
Absolutely. All right. Why don't you tell us all what Rainforest does before we dive in?
So Rainforest is payments as a service. We are embedded payments. All of our customers are vertical SaaS. So they're SaaS applications that target some specific type of business to help them typically run their business. And the one thing they have in common is that every single one of them could use payments as a feature of their product. Typically, they're already doing something with payments or something that's payments adjacent, like invoicing or quotes or whatever it is. And but they all could sell and offer payments to their customers. It makes their product more valuable. And it also gives them an opportunity to bring in a new revenue stream, which is sometimes quite significant.
Fantastic. That could be a whole episode itself, but obviously we got one to get to right now. And this one's going to be about having a zero-bug policy. If I'm listening in, I'm going to ask the question of what that means. Somebody's like, Amir, why are you asking what zero-bug policy means? It seems it's pretty straightforward, but don't like to assume. Zero-bug policy, if you could tell us what that means and make sure we're all on the same page.
So we have a zero bug policy. What that means is we aim to have zero bugs. In practice, everybody that writes software is going to have defects. Sometimes it's things that you didn't think about, and sometimes it's things that you couldn't possibly have foreseen, particularly in our domain, which is fintech, where you have a lot of different integrations to different kinds of payment networks and different vendors. But I don't think we're unique to that either. There's all different kinds of edge cases that are undocumented or you just, couldn't have reasonably thought of in advance. And it's important to take an attitude that you are going to really find those defects, find those edge cases, and you're going to fix them and remediate them.
Absolutely. And just to kind of dive in there, every company is going to have defects. You mentioned that. When we look at those defects and we categorize the size, the impact of those defects, when we're looking at a zero-bug policy, is it very strict, as in we are legitimately saying our aim is for zero defects, or are there different levels of categorizations of what those defects would look like for us to kind of be able to still adhere to a zero-bug policy? Is there a bell curve, or is it really strict?
I think it needs to be strict. I mean, there's always prioritization. You're always, the impact of things is going to determine your response. But I really don't want to be curating a backlog of broken things. When people start talking to me about, there's always bugs, and you just kind of make sure that you fix the important ones. I'm like, well, what's the percentage of rodent droppings that you'd find acceptable in your dinner? I think in this business, over the long run, quality is a strategic differentiator, and people have just gotten used to quality being low. They're used to having software solutions where reports don't load. They're used to in fintech where the money doesn't necessarily match what the reports say. And if you ever think people don't care about what you do, mess with their money. Quality really matters. Not just on the big things like, can we account for every cent that's moved, but also on the little things. If you, going back to my restaurant metaphor, if you walk into a restaurant and there's dust all over like the plants in the entrance, what's your immediate reaction about the cleanliness of the food that you're eating? Quality matters, and it matters to people's perceptions, and it matters to the quality of the service that you're providing.
Great analogy. I love that. I guess when we look at trying to get to a point where we can have zero-bug policy, and maybe I'm going to go a little bit out of order from my intro into the episode, but when we're aiming for that, and let's say you're at an organization where you don't have it, right? You're running a typical organization, there's defects, you work on them, but if you're looking for a zero-bug policy, does the engineering work have to change? Is there something that has to happen? Is it just, because obviously saying we're just going to deliver at a higher standard might not exactly be enough.
No, that's not enough. There's a couple things that have to happen. One, you can't fix the things you can't see. And so you have to bring in a mindset that everything you do has to have pretty comprehensive monitoring and just visibility into what's happening. For example, on our team, anytime that an error condition occurs in the software, it immediately alerts and pages an engineer. We want to have full visibility into what's going on there. We want to know when there's a problem because you can't fix the things you can't see, and you can't fix the things that you don't have enough information to be able to even investigate.
Absolutely. If you're looking at making some adjustments to your engineering org, I guess, and maybe, I don't know if we can kind of compare how things are done at Rainforest versus maybe typical engineering teams. From an operational standpoint, are there different teams? Are there teams that are aligned differently? Because obviously we're going to get into a release cycle conversation in a second, but I guess the topology of the teams, does it need to fundamentally differ versus another organization?
I think every organization structures their teams a little differently. So, it depends on what the domain is. Our teams are structured where they own, there's a shared code base, but they own sort of like areas, spheres of influence within that. They own specific sets of functionality. And so they'll work on, owning those through to production. They'll own the monitoring around those. Each team has its own on-call rotation, and on-call, somebody has to be alerted when there's a problem. Somebody has to have their time set aside to be interruptible. And so for our zero bug policy and for quality, on-call is the first point of contact when there's a problem. They're the people that their job is to investigate things, triage them, figure out what's going on there, respond to alerts and problems. But it doesn't mean that they can fix everything. And I think that's where a lot of organizations stop and kind of get stuck. On-call gets overwhelmed pretty easily, particularly if there's a lot going on. And so the way we work with them, on-call's the first point of contact. They're the people that they're trying to triage issues, they're trying to understand the severity. If it's serious enough that it is an active and imminent degradation of our SLAs, we declare an incident and pull more people in, and we work on it until it's resolved. We have a whole structure that we train people on how to do incident response. But if it's something that is smaller in impact and it's something that they can just fix, sometimes it's easier to communicate what the issue is with a pull request than it is to try to start getting into the prioritization process and start writing up the scope of a ticket. So we want people to just fix things if they're simple. A lot of things are not. A lot of things, you investigate a bit and you realize there's something a little more complicated here that we need to work through. That's where we bring it into our plant work process. It's not just one person working on it. It comes into, plant work typically in the coming cycle, but we try to reserve at least 20% of our capacity to just fixing bugs, to just improving things and making them better. That's where I think most organizations get it wrong, is they reserve capacity and they fill up capacity for all of the strategic initiatives or all of the things that they can plan, and they end up typically trying to squeeze as much of that in as possible. You need to start from a place of just planning to have less capacity and understand that there are going to be a number of things that are important to address that you can't foresee, but when they come up, if you're already over budgeted, you're over allocated, you're not going to be able to jump on those. And one of several things is going to happen. One, you're going to end up with that backlog of broken things that is just sad. And two, your people are going to get this, it's like a silent tax. If you don't fix things, they're going to break, and they're going to break in ways that distracts people. It sucks up their time. They end up, losing time, maybe even days, to trying to, repair things in production, to fix data. They may be investigating issues that have actually been seen before, but weren't remediated. And so you end up just over time, there's this cumulative effect that taxes a team's ability to move more quickly when they don't fix these things as they come up.
Very interesting. And I guess, the one thing, and we'll come back to, I think, a follow-up question, but I did mention, obviously, we're talking about small release cycles. To achieve zero bug policy, I mean, you referred to this as having multiple smaller releases. When you look at that, and obviously, you can't obviously be specific. I know we're talking about generalizations, but is that like 6 per day or whatever that number is? Is that become a hard and fast rule to the org, or is it based on the level of what needs to be released? Does it get adjusted? I mean, what flexibility is there in how many small releases you guys have?
So here's how I think about it. We're a SaaS shop, which means that there's one copy of our software and we run it. And so the changes that we release, which is very different from other types of software businesses, but in ours, the changes we release are kind of under our own control. Companies fall into the trap of thinking about releasing software as if it's really risky to make a change. They misunderstand what the risk of change is. The risk of change, I argue here, is something like the square of the size of the change. What does that mean? If you're releasing a 50-line code change into production, you can look at every line of it. You can hold in your head what the impacts are. You know what metrics you need to be monitoring to see if it works correctly. You know exactly what to test. If you're releasing 5,000 lines, you probably have no idea. If you start combining different patches with different features going out, the combinatorial explosion of possible interactions between those, nobody can reason about. And so we believe that risk is directly related to that cognitive overhead of being able to understand the change that's going out. So smaller changes more frequently are way less risky than large changes infrequently. Not to mention things you do all the time, you get really good at. If you're deploying 5-10 times a day, then you know that your tooling, your pipelines, your controls around rollbacks and monitoring have to be really hardened. And you get confidence in things that you do every day. If you did a release every month, it's going to be a mess every time you do it because you never do it.
That's actually a very good point. That muscle memory itself for Rainforest, I guess, or maybe the current setup, is it something that you guys started with day one? Did you guys end up moving to the zero bug policy?
Yeah, we started with this day one. We knew that we wanted to build a highly automated change control pipeline. We knew that we wanted to do blue-green deploys. We knew that test coverage. We don't have a QA team. We write all automated tests with our developers. And the idea is that when they make a change, they also write the automated test that it's like it proves that their code works correctly. And then another developer reviews that to make sure that it's covering the different scenarios, it's accurate. But those automated tests, that's what allows us to move quickly. It's what protects us forever going forward. We knew from day one as well that test coverage is one of those things that you really can never play catch up with. You can, but it's really hard. It's like exercise. It's much easier to stay in shape than it is to get in shape.
That's that one hits home. I guess when you're looking at making this shift, and again, I mean, you guys have the luxury of already having made that decision. If you're an organization where you're like, hey, this sounds pretty interesting, maybe we're going to try. I guess if you were to project this mindset to an org that does not have a zero bug policy, I guess what would that kind of org, what kind of changes would you start making first? What are some, I don't know if they're easy, but what are some first steps to actually heading down this path?
That's a good question. I think the starting place is making sure that you have the right visibility, that you just make things noisy. It almost feels like you're making things worse for a little while, because when you start making things noisy, when you start putting alerts in place, when you start asking questions about how can I see if there's a problem, what does good look like? And you start there with the ability to even quantify what you're looking at. And then from there, it's less about trying to get things perfect because no one ever does. Even with a zero bug policy, things are never perfect, but it's about putting that operational process in place where every time that there's a problem, you're just making sure that someone is looking at it and you're making continuous improvements to the system. There's a prioritization process, and as you get into it, you may realize that there's times where there's just a lot of known issues, and things start piling up a little bit. That's okay. It's okay. It means though that you have work to do, and you need to get to a place where if as that list of issues climbs up, you get to a place where you just keep burning it down, and eventually burning back down, and you can get back ahead of it. But you keep going, and you make sure that you are recognizing that you will never achieve a place where everything is perfect and you don't have to worry about quality anymore. You just have you plan that you will forever be fixing things and improving things, and you build that kind of muscle memory in. You build where people and the team are excited about seeking clarity, really understanding deeply what's going on with user experience, with the SLAs, with how the systems are interacting internally. And you really just try to build a culture of people that get to the bottom of things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I am kind of curious. When we do look at something like, and I guess in a zero bug policy, when you're thinking about tech debt, can you maybe talk to us about, is there room for tech debt when you have a zero bug policy, or is there a case where zero bug policy and tech debt are going to have to go down their separate ways? Because you did mention, obviously, some planned work that has to come down. So I was kind of curious what your thoughts then on tech debt are.
I always push back a little bit on tech debt. What does tech debt mean? A tech debt is such an umbrella term that's used for so many different things. It can mean anything from we haven't upgraded our some core system like a database in 10 years. It can mean that we've got known security vulnerabilities. It could be that the application keeps crashing on different requests. And it could mean there's some code that's kind of ugly and it could be cleaned up and refactored. It can mean a lot of different things. I think tech debt's one of those things where you have to kind of pick a different phrase and you have to try to break it down into what is the real underlying issue here? And what is the impact of that underlying issue? That'll help people understand, really what are they trying to solve for and prioritize it accordingly. So yes, but I think that tech debt from a certain perspective is too coarse of a lens. If you can break it down into what is it we're really talking about, what is the real issue we're trying to solve, then absolutely we can prioritize those things, or not, depending on if there's not really an impact. But I think that you have to really get to the heart of what is the issue that's being brought up.
Absolutely. I guess as we're seeing a lot of companies head down the path of using various code generating tools to help within the process, I hear all different levels of experience with them. As we are seeing these used more and more by engineering teams, I guess if you are, and I don't know if you guys are, but in theory at least, if you are using some of these code generating tools and your goal is zero bug policy, does the additional code not being written by your team, does that add to issues in trying to identify bugs in general? Is it a case where if you have good documentation and you have good processes in place, you should still be able to identify those bugs at the same rate before they go out?
I think that there's no replacement for people thinking deeply about the solution that they're releasing and understanding the domain really well. You never want to get to a place where you are generating code faster than you can reason about the correctness of it. And correctness is one of those things that's sometimes subtle and requires you really spend time kind of synthesizing that knowledge. I think that there's a big place for those tools. But I think that one of the places that they've been particularly interesting is not just writing the code faster, but helping to verify it faster. Can you use AI to find bugs in code that humans wrote? Can you use it to find bugs in code the different AI program wrote? Can you use it like like a linter that is on steroids? Can you, it's trying to think about it from a different perspective than just, can I generate a feature faster? And instead recognize like there's an entire life cycle to how we build code. It can fit into a lot of different places within that life cycle, and recognizing that helping people understand the domain better and get to a better product faster is really the goal, not just shipping the underlying code faster.
I like that a lot. I think that's actually, it's an interesting discussion, because when we start talking about where these AI tools fit in, and we're talking about small releases, we're talking zero bug policy, and as I've asked the question different times, is as humans are being further away from the code, we lose that context, and I think context to me is massively important, even when you deal with a popular, LLM public-facing tool, and you asking without that context, those answers sometimes don't mean anything. When you look at context and you look at companies that are trying to leverage some of these tools, and they're trying to make sure that their engineers are that human in the loop, I guess that relationship of adding more speed, adding the ability to move faster, in theory, do you kind of envision that we would be, with that time, would we just get to more stuff on the backlog? Would we just, with that efficiency, where do we use that efficiency, I guess is the question.
I think when AI is able to speed things up, it's able to speed up the things that we understand and we can reason about the correctness of fairly quickly. A lot of places, though, in my own experience, where we've taken a lot of time to build something is because we didn't really understand what we were building. And so we had to grapple with it for a while. Sometimes we had to iterate on it a few times to really get to the place where we understood it well enough to build the right solution. AI can help you with that, but it can't understand it for you. It's that saying about, I didn't have time to write a short letter, so I wrote a long one. People do that with code. And I think there's no shortcut to being able to get to the place where you can succinctly describe the problem you're trying to solve. But I do think that you can streamline a lot of the work that ladders up to that. But you never want to ship product faster than you can think about it. If that makes sense.
No, that does make sense. I think that's great advice. And maybe final question before we let you get back to it is, if you do have, I think I asked the question, but if you are looking at an org that's not starting from scratch, and maybe there's a best learning experience from having done it at Rainforest and having that experience of what's a gotcha that you just don't anticipate until you're already down the path. Is there one? Is there something that you'd be like, hey, you just make sure you're paying attention to this if you do want to, adopt a zero bug policy?
People underestimate a couple things that they underestimate. One, they underestimate how much time they're actually going to spend trying to fix things. And you have to have this kind of marathon mentality that, people have this idea of like, once we fix this thing or we do this thing, that everything's going to be great. And that doesn't exist. You will forever be working on bugs and making things better. And it's, in short, it's because, the things that are working, you are quiet. It's the things that aren't working are the noisy ones, at least they should be. And so you kind of have to develop an understanding that you're forever going to be working on making things better and on dealing with things that are a bit broken. People also, they overestimate how much they can do quickly, and they underestimate how much they can do over the long run. You have to kind of take that mentality as well. If you're in an organization that, let's say you come in and there's everything's out of date. There's some really legacy patterns in there. Maybe there's some like turnover and there's some knowledge gaps. It's going to take a lot of time to just grapple with those. And you kind of have to break the problem down and just focus on making one thing better at a time. And it can be disheartening if you have this vision for where you want to be, and it's going to take years to get there. But if every single day you can make progress on something, every single day some piece, even if it's small, gets better, it ladders up over the long run, and it ends up, within even a few years, you can get to a place where everything is different, everything is rebuilt. And I think that's what healthy software looks like. It's a lot like the human body, where all of your cells get replaced, but it's still you. The ship of Theseus, and you should view software that way as well, where it's that iterative, continuous improvement process where you're always making something better, and you're just kind of systematically prioritizing how you focus on it without worrying too much about, well, gosh, there's all these other things. You can't let it overwhelm you, and you just have to stay focused one step in front of another.
Love it. Chris, thanks for taking the time. Thanks for sharing with us lots of insights. If somebody does have a follow-up question, because you gave us a lot of insights and advice, I'm sure I did not ask something that others might want me to have. Is there a good way of connecting with you?
Reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Okay, fantastic. All right. So appreciate the time, Chris. Thank you very much. And be back again, different guest, different topic. Until then, two things. We actually talked to Chris about zero bug policy. We talked about what that actually means in practice, how the team makeup looks, the mindset, and dealing with those small releases, and what are some learning lessons if you are not there and you'd like to get there. So Chris outlined all that and a little bit more. So hopefully you can share this with somebody else who might benefit from it. Also, like, subscribe, comment. Let me know how the show's going for you. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.